This one's a little tricky for a transition question. As always, we want to think about dumb summaries here. The summaries of the sentences can help us understand the relationship, but also the summaries of the choices can help us understand what these words really mean. We don't use these kind of longer transition words very often, but they have similar versions that we do use more often. So we'll look at that in a second. I do want to point out, though, that it's not that weird that in this particular transition question, the transition's in the middle of the sentence and there isn't really like a second sentence. It's all one. The semicolon is kind of functioning here like the period would in a normal transition question. We still want to do the same kind of thing. There's a sentence or idea before the transition that we need to look at and summarize, and then there's a sentence that contains the transition that we also need to summarize. And so keep it simple. So here it's very easy to do that. However, Berkeley anthropologist Terence Deacon saw a contradiction in this idea, so contradiction, probably a helpful word. Song complexity should occur when there is pressure to identify a mate of the same species, so it should occur at a certain condition. Blank, it should not occur among birds in captivity where this pressure is lower. So all of this points to the idea of a contrast. And so that would lead us probably to choice B. The problem is that even though instead is a contrast word, it wouldn't really make sense in this context, just from the way that things are worded. So let me try my best here. Song complexity should occur when there is pressure to identify a mate of the same species. If we said instead, it should not occur among birds in captivity where this pressure is lower. That's what we would really want to use the word instead for is if we wanted to say something like, song complexity should occur when there is pressure to identify a mate of the same species. Instead, a study showed that that didn't happen. Or maybe better yet, if they started with complexity should not occur among birds in captivity. Instead, it should occur in the wild. It's hard to describe why. This is just like sometimes what happens in the writing section is we say things because we say them, and instead it doesn't really work the way that this sentence is trying to say. So it's not the right answer, even though it's the one that I would gravitate towards because it implies a contradiction. It's definitely not after all. This is one of those filler ones where it's like, it doesn't really mean anything. After all just kind of means like in summary or after a long story, you say, oh, after all, here's here's the moral of my story. This is not a story here, so there's no kind of sequence of events. And it's not a similar situation. We probably knew that because it's saying completely different things. It's saying here's when this should happen and here's when this should not happen. So it's odd that therefore ends up being the right answer. Because that's a word that to us means something like so. And I think this is where the dumb summary helps us out again, is it really simplifies it, and it does make sense if we think about this as a so situation. Song complexity should occur when there is pressure to identify a mate of the same species. So, it should not occur among birds in captivity where this pressure is lower, right? It should occur when there is pressure, so it should not occur when there's no pressure, right? Then I think they're gonna, I forget what the passage is. I think they kind of contradict that. But in this area here, they're trying to say that they're not different ideas. This is the thing, is it seems like it's a contrast, but it's actually the same kind of point that they're making. They're saying something should happen and or the conditions that it should happen, and then the opposite of that is, okay, well, if we don't have those conditions, it shouldn't happen, right? So let me try to think of an example really quick. People should carry umbrellas while it's raining. So people shouldn't have umbrellas if it's not raining. Right? It's a contrast, but it's kind of based upon the same principle, is that the umbrella is for rain, so if there is no rain, there's no umbrella. It's tricky, and that's what happens sometimes with transition questions, is things kind of are tricky. And so our job is to untricky them as much as we can. So dumb summaries really do help. I think that we still did the right thing here. And if you got choice B, I wouldn't get too mad at yourself. You probably followed the strategy correctly. We just found a rare case where it doesn't quite work out as we would expect. And that's going to happen. That's why strategies are not perfect. Every strategy has an exception. But in general, it's a good place to start. You can always, though, check your answer against the lines. Plug that word in. See how it sounds. Make sure it feels it's actually doing what you think it's supposed to do. That way we don't, fall for any sort of sneakiness like the SAT is doing here.